And then I went travelling and I went away and I came back to working with Art Shape again, teaching for a while, and felt the need, and I was trying to apply for artist in residencies and stuff. I mean, you know, as your journey to professional artist comes along, you'll realise that the jobs are quite thin, and I don't want to feel for doom gloom. The wages aren't absolutely brilliant, and there's lots of people going for them that are, you know, quite highly educated and stuff. It's quite, so I wanted to go, but I'd had a big gap, and I'd studied about being a gallery artist in a way, and I now didn't feel like one. I felt like I was doing all this wonderful work with Art Shape and all the tea breaks and all the, some of the classes I used to hold, we would teach and have long tea breaks and teach if that was the need of that. And the things that were going on, the social things that were going on in the Art Shape classes, people meeting, people building friendships, forming stuff, meeting outside the classes was just magic, and that wasn't really, there was nowhere on the adult education form to fit those outcomes, and that I felt that was as much my creativity as the piece of work that came out to the end. So I became less interested in the final product and putting it in a gallery, and more interested in the journey that it takes to let people see their inside artist. So I decided to study social sculpture, which I shall explain a bit more about later. And I've just finished that, and this is where I am now. So that's why I'm here. But expanded, I'm sorry. But, so. And tea being very important, thank you very much.
Coronation Street.
Oh.
Everything Coronation Street, get a cup of tea, you know, just
Yeah, it's a very northern thing, tea, so it's very, and it is quite ritualistic. You go to China, we've got the Chinese tea ceremonies, it's very important. And it also gives people a length of time. If I do a piece of work with someone, or I want to in dialogue with someone, and I offer them a cup of tea, it's almost like it's got a quiet, it's all the hidden messages that cup of tea gives you. It's like there's a time limit to a cup of tea.
If things go wrong.
Like, you know that if you say to someone, would you like a cup of tea, you just want half an hour at a time. That's it, because you know the general time. So when I did my end piece of work where I was doing the crochet and I made people tea and cakes, they sort of knew when they stopped in the street that they would be there for half an hour. It wasn't going to be a 2-minute talk, I wasn't doing a survey. So that helped me in my public engagement with the work I did in the streets at the end. So.
Like war films, they always have. In war films, they always have a cup of tea when something goes wrong.
Yeah. I don't know. I did start off thinking it was a very British thing.
Yeah.
But then as I travel more, you go to Turkey and you can't get past one shop without mint tea. And then you go to, is it
Egypt?
Apple tea is Turkey, Morocco's the mint tea. Honestly, everywhere you go, that is part of a social engagement tool, a really strong one. So that's sort of why I'm, you know. I'm going to pass those that way. I'm going to pass those that way. Coffee. There you go. That's me. Just going to grab the rest of my good tea. And a little bit of an explanation why sometimes I'm very focused, sometimes I get a bit, you know, I'm still fascinated with what dyslexia and attention deficit disorder, the hidden disabilities. That, you know, I always quiver over the disabled box in job applications. It's a hard one because obviously it's officially recognised as a disability, but you know, but then we could do a whole day on that. Let's start me on that one. But yeah, but I just suggest that if anyone's interested in that, you know, looking into and understanding the strengths and the power that you can get from just being a little bit quirky in the way you think, then TED Talks. I would highly recommend people look at TED Talks and look up at TED Talks ADD, ADHD. There's some amazingly inspirational young people, all age people in there doing some good TED Talks about the subject. So yeah, right. Frozen, he was terribly cold, and they covered him in lard, in animal fat, and they wrapped him in felt, and they pulled him along the sledge and they rescued him and they brought him back to life and they saved him. Years later, that story has been like questioned over the years. But this is why Joseph Beuys's early career, he started to make things out of felt and fact, because he was interested in order out of chaos. So if you've got a bunch of wool and you tease it, you make chaos out of it, and you form it into felt, which is uniform, which is one of the most uniform fabrics you can get if you think about felt, where it goes back together, so it's all from chaos. He felt the same about his fat. Fat is a material that you can form, and it can melt, and it can come back, and it can melt, and he was interested in, that's why he was interested in these two. He felt life-saving forms. Then he went on to start the Green Party. He was the founding member of the first Green Party in Germany in the 60s. And he started studying the work of Rudolf Steiner, Goethe, Schiller, the German philosophers, and yeah, those three. I think that was all he studied. And he moved it, and he started, and his artworks, although he's known for his actions and performances, he did things with hair. He did a piece of work where it was all a big hoo-ha, everyone was wanting to see his new body of work, and when people came to the private view, he locked all the doors, and he had a gallery with window, and he just spent the time, he covered himself with bee, honey, and then he covered himself with gold leaf, and he just acted, and so it was very strange, and everybody was outside looking in the window in his gallery full of his paintings, and he took a dead hair, and he walked the dead hair around all the paintings, and he explained all of his work to the dead hair. No one outside could hear it. And the reason he did that was to show respect for the animal world, for all the damage that's been done to the animals from human beings, and how we do not work with nature anymore. We destroy nature, and we destroy the world. So that's why he did that. And then he moved on to doing a piece where he flew into America. It's called, the first time he'd ever been there, it's called Why I Love America and America Loves Me. And he went over it on an airplane, and he went straight into the back of an ambulance, and they drove him, so he never touched the soil, never touched the ground anymore. He went straight onto the ambulance, straight to the gallery, straight in the room, and he sat in a room with a wild coyote, wrapped himself in felt with a big stick, sat there for 3 days with a wild coyote. Then he went back onto the ambulance thing, back into the ambulance, back to the, and went home.
What about food and toilets and...
What about the feeding the wild coyote?
There's more details. You know, you can look. That's the overall idea. You can go deep into that. You can look into. You can look it up yourself.
It was in a cage.
It was in. Yeah, it was caged off.
So I made it work.
Yeah.
Fine with what I was doing.
Just
Boys.
yeah.
Then
And
to
then
me, because I didn't know anything about this.
Well, the reason he did that piece.
Yeah.
This is a conceptual piece. The reason he did that piece, the way he did it, was he felt that it was a homage to the Native American Indians. So it was about them, it was to do with them, and it was with reference to the Vietnam War, which was still going on. So it was 1973 that he did that piece. So that was his idea behind doing it. Then he moved on, and he started, he felt that people should have access to education, everybody. So he worked for, I can't remember the name of the university in Germany, he worked for a famous university in Germany, and they came to him and they said, look, 200 people have applied for your course, but you can only take 40. And he's like, no, I'm taking them all. So they wouldn't have it. So first day, he let everybody, everybody who applied was in there. And the college sacked him, the university sacked him, so he then moved outside the university and set up working every day with a blackboard to the people who wanted to come outside the university. So
Bit of a legend.
Yeah, he's a legend. Then he started getting into Steiner. He studied Steiner's 12 senses. Have you ever heard of Steiner's 12 senses? Right, Steiner's 12 senses are touch, life, because you know if you're alive or not, that's a sense. You can sense if something's alive or not. Movement, balance, smell, taste, sight, temperature. Now, sense of temperature is my favourite one, because you know if you're cold or you know if you're hot. You know if a person is warm or a person is cold. You can tell the temperature, the emotional temperature of a room, of a nice, you know if you're comfortable in something or you're not comfortable. You say it's warm in there or it's cold. It's cold environment, cold atmosphere. So that's the temperature one. Hearing, speech, thought, and ego, the I sense, the sense of the self, which is like, especially with lots of people who are autistic, their sense of self is disjointed and stuff. So yeah, that's the sense of the self. and he looked very closely at stuff like that, and he did a lot of the work. I find it harder to understand of his is that there was a threefold social. He was into universal basic incomes and different ways of society living, and he felt that everybody was an artist. Joseph Beuys believed that it was possible to transform society through the creativity of every individual. He emerged as an artist amid Germany's post-war reconstruction, claiming for art a unique role in the spiritual regeneration of society in opposition to materialistic culture. Everybody is an artist. Beuys believed art should be a kind of social sculpture, in other words, how we mould and shape the world in which we live. Sculpture is an evolutionary process. Everyone as an artist simply means that the human being is a creative being, that he is creator, and what's more, that he can be productive in different ways. To Beuys, it's irrelevant whether a product comes from a painter, a sculptor, or from a physicist or a chef. It's a piece of art, he says. So for Beuys, artist was the word to describe the essence of what it means to be a human being. A deep need and fundamental ability to create and be creative. And that is how, when we talked this morning, almost everybody without a single person not counted is found their own clumsy way to their creativity being their healing. Being for healing. We've all, I think, everybody, haven't they, has found it themselves, their creativity to heal. So you can be an artistic mother, you can be an artistic manager, you can be an artistic bus driver, even an artistic politician. It doesn't matter what your means of expression are. Being an artist means being creative in whatever way is available for you and that feels natural to you. Okay? So he started to want to join people into his work. So he did a piece of work in 1982 for an exhibition called Documentation in Germany. 7,000 oaks. So what he did is he proposed a plan to plant 7,000 oaks throughout the city of Kassel, the German city of Kassel. Each of them he paired with a basalt stone. So you'll see in a minute he did a big arrow outside the gallery with one tree at the end, and he put 7,000 big asphalt stones onto the ground. And he encouraged people to pick up the stones and take them somewhere in the town and put it down, and for each stone you have to plant a tree. So what he did is he planted 7,000 trees, extra trees, and it led to discussions. Yeah, the project was seen locally as a gesture towards green urban renewal. It took 5 years to complete and has spread to all other cities around the world. So his idea of, so this was back you've got to think, 1982. People didn't know what they know now. It wasn't nobody was doing that. Nobody was saying, look, it was all just a few hippies thinking about, what the environment is happening and all the green gases.
So you moved this thing around and then they planted a tree where the same one?
Yeah, so we encouraged the people of the town to be participants.
So that's like a religious thing as well, isn't it? Having crosses. What's it called? I can't remember who it is, but they, like in Britain there's these crosses where Saint whoever it was stopped and then they built a cross. So it's the same sort of thing.
That's what that reminded me of, was like people and the sort of like nature and sort of like man-made objects. Sort of like
similar to that, what he was saying is about he wanted people to look closer at nature and look at the trees and think about how a tree grows and think about how long it takes the world to make that piece of stone, how long it's taken to form, and to think of the world as a we're here for a fleeting moment, but the planet has to last. I think it was his statement. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's been more plastic used between 2000 and now, as more plastic made in just this century than the rest of the century added, the last century before it added up. It's just been,
So it's all this water bottles now. I mean, when we had the shop in the 80s when we first moved in, it was all Lucasade bottles and Ribena, like all in glass bottles. You give them the deposit, then it all switched to.
It's a byproduct of oil, isn't it? So it's
Yeah, it is. That's
all
why.
the Middle
Yeah,
East.
that's why they don't want to reduce it. That's why they don't want to get rid of it, because there's too much, again, money being made out of
And they
it.
also say that, because they were starting to make it into fleeces, weren't they? You recycled bottles. But someone said when you wash that, some of the plastic goes off.
Those
does.
millions of particles.
Yeah, it does. It poisons us and gets in our food and our water systems and in our bodies.
Microbeads. I've thrown everything away.
Sorry. That's the cart I made to take with me. So everything, it had drawers at the end, and it all comes apart and goes into a cart. It comes into 4 pieces with the umbrella. But I make tea and cake, sit people down and crochet. And I've got all my drawers there, and I make people gift. I ask them to come and join me, and I say, I'll swap you your conversation for a gift. And I make them, and I use cut-up T-shirts or videotape. I used videotape and made them bottle holders for plastic bottles, and I encouraged them to, I put the bottle down and I said, look, think about that bottle while I'm starting your thing, and it took about 20 minutes to make the thing and 20 minutes to have the cup of tea, so they knew it was about half an hour. I'd say to them, could you please imagine that bottle and imagine that somebody threw it in the bin and not recycled it, and tell me where you think it might go. And I've done it with 7-year-old children, and I've done it with really old people and everyone in between, all sorts of different people, and collected the stories that they will say and get them to think quietly about it and gauge their imagination, and then make them the gift. And hopefully the experience of meeting this crazy person doing art in the street and having a cup of tea and a cake and a conversation and having a gift will make them go home and make them feel their own agency, that actually maybe I use too much plastic, maybe I'll buy a bottle for life, maybe I'll stop, you know, and it might create change in them, and it creates conversation. So that was the final sort of pick of my answer.
And the tea cart as well, just
Yes.
finding it. It's all like vintage china and everything.
Yes,
isn't it?
I've chosen
So, you know,
every,
yeah.
and this is about the close looking, you said, about
teapots.
developing, and it's about developing a piece of work, because I was fed up with making a piece of work, showing it, and I'll never sell anywhere, I've never sold work, but so I'd make a piece of work, do it, and then where do you put it, what do you do with it? So I thought I wanted to make a piece of work that I could grow, and by accepting that those conversations and the dialogue I was having was my art form and my art material, each time I take that cart to a different place, it's a new art form. Although I'm still taking the cart, I'm still taking the needle, every conversation is different, everything is different. So that's where I've made a work of longevity, if you see what I mean.
So do you record it? Do you record
I
it?
do record them, yeah, and I'm thinking of ways, but as it develops, so each time I do it, I add a new element, or take a bit out, or move a bit forward, and it develops. So and it keeps interesting.
Do you know what I find lovely about that is that with psychotherapy and analytical therapies and you know all this monetized intervention, just to value a conversation with a gift, and the people's life experiences are precious, you know, and they all put into a therapy session, but it's sort of reframing in some ways.
It is exactly reframing, exactly what it is. And it's all, I looked into gifting. Lewis Hyde, there was a guy called Maus or something in the 20s in France. He wrote this book about gifting as a philosophy of life, of giving and gifting. And then Lewis Hyde brought it forward again in his book's called The Gift. It's an amazing book. And he looked into the history of gifting around the world and around indigenous tribes. And has anyone ever heard of a thing called Indian giving?
Yeah.
I'll explain how that came about, right? When the Native American Indians lived together and somebody moved into their community, they all went round and they took the pipe. And they gave the pipe to the new person in the new house. Because what that meant is when they were ready to do the peace pipe and have their smoke, they'd all go to the new person's house because that's where the pipe lived. So that was bringing that new person into the community, and then when someone else moved in, they'd ceremonially take the pipe. So that pipe held the history of all the people that lived in that place. Then the English came over, or the Dutch, or the Germans, or whoever came over, and they came in, and it was like, you've moved in, welcome, here's the pipe. And then what did they do? Send it back to London, put it in the museum. Thank you, that's a gift. And they sent it back, and it went into the museum. So when the next person moved into the village, everyone went round to the English person, can we have the pipe back? And they're like, well, you gave it to me. So that's where the negative connotations of just saying Indian giver. But what it meant was they took the object that held the memories of all of the people who did them, and they sent it to them, and they broke the chain.
Understand what it
And it's done, and all around the world it's done again and again and again. There's an island near Tahiti, I think, where they used to do it with shells and stuff, and people would hold it. Like you win a prize and you put your thing in, and next year you give it back and the next person wins it. It was that
White
theory
privilege,
of
sort of that, yeah.
gifting is that. So I've started, I make heirlooms as well. I make tea cozies for people. Put one of my tea cozies. and that's in the hope that the love I've put into the tea cozy and given it as a gift will make someone want to not throw that away. Because it's again about the ethics, it's about the ethicals. Which will lead me back to, so we've done Joseph Beuys a bit. Please feel if I pricked your interest and have a little look at him. There's some brilliant, like, most of it's in German. He's got such a thick German accent, it's quite difficult to understand him, but there are YouTube videos about him and stuff like that if you find that an accessible way of learning. So, but he did make free universities, and his work got more and more conceptual as he went on, but people are still unpicking him, and they're still realising a lot of the things he started have carried on into mainstream community arts nowadays, and that's where the idea of everybody being an artist, everybody can shape their own life to be creative. So that's what he means when he says everybody's an artist, you know.
Like I remember him kind of, but I don't remember this amazing stuff.
That's because it wasn't really recorded a lot.
Right.
There was a lot of, don't forget the time he came out, in the 50s and stuff. Germany was sort of a bit of a swear word, especially German philosophy, and any of the philosophy they felt might have moved into Hitler's ideas. You see, so it was almost like it was paused a bit, and people have discovered it and unpicked it a bit later on that Steiner didn't actually, you know, And I'd never done philosophy. I found it very fascinating, and I looked into it, and I kept finding things I didn't like about people, like even Steiner, who I work at Ruskin Mill now, and which is a Steiner and Ruskin based philosophy college. So I sort of to do with the land and everything's lovely. And I love Steiner's work, but then he said there was a hierarchy of race. So he said that every time you died and you got reborn, you would be lighter. So everybody linked it with Hitler, but it wasn't linked with Hitler, it was linked with Steiner going to India, and the caste system in India, which already exists, where the lighter your skin is, the more pure you are, you know. So it was quite, so, you know, a lot of this stuff wasn't really, and a lot of Joseph Beuys's work with using the mind and imagination and direct democracy of people changing stuff and sort of moving into that. It wasn't really looked at, it wasn't really understood so well. Again, because of...
Well, certainly the only really stuff that I've heard on my course was about the fact that the things that weren't true, but they are true to me, because they're part of his life's work.
His perception is true.
Yeah, so you can change your history to fit with who you are now. And after the war, things were so dreadful that people really had to do that. And then later artists did things differently, like Gerhard Richter and what have you.
Burmese camp.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people get sort of chucked out because of, you know, they say, don't take me notice of him, this is not true. There's a lot of artists who sort of manufactured a history, something about themselves.
Dali, he was like...
Yeah, and it's sort of, why wouldn't you?
Echoed our conversation this morning, didn't it, Claire, about reading somebody's whole body of work rather than, you know,
Just taking one bit of it.
Checking that
Get
out.
the perspective right, what they actually meant.
Definitely.
So social sculpture basically, the social sculpture course now is called Social Sculpture and Connected Practice. So it's about connecting with people. So these are the basic things I've written down, and I'll try and expand on each of them. So the way I studied it, it was about shaping experiences for others by exploring the way we come to ideas and our own creative practice. So by looking into the way I work and I think about things, and doing that with a very connected, nurturing group that I did it with, we sat there for like sometimes 10 hours a day, sat down like this, talking about quite heavy. So I'd come home with a head spinning. Do you know what I mean? It was quite difficult to understand, but picking out of it, these are the main things that have stuck with me. But I think it's the sort of course where it didn't only artists didn't only go on it, There was people who worked in training, in social care, and non-violent communication forms, in just looking for creative ways to train. So it came from the work of Paulo Freire. He's one of the people we studied, and I don't know if you've heard of him. He was Brazilian, and he wrote a book, very important book, pivotal book in education called The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And I love the word pedagogy, and when I found out what it meant, I loved it even more. It's the philosophy of teaching. So he basically grew up very poor, and he in Brazil, and he realised that lots of people couldn't read and write. There was a massive literacy problem in that country, and it was holding people back, and it was making the divide bigger, and keeping people poor, and keeping people down, and keeping people low. So we tried to work out a new way of teaching people, and he said that standing up on in front of a class and expecting everybody to rote learn was not